Hello, we are continuing in our series of shows based on Dr. Laitman's, Kabbalist Dr. Laitman's book, Like a Bundle of Reeds. The book was published about a year ago, and it deals with the essence of Judaism. Who is a Jew, what it means to be Jewish, and as a result, and especially pertinent for today, the role of Jews, why there's anti-Semitism, how we can resolve anti-Semitism, and everything that has to do with this, with all these subjects. Dr. Laitman, in the previous show, we ended up at a point that left a big question mark. You were talking about how the Jews have this something special about them, that the nations of the world hate us because we have it, and they don't, and they can't have it. You talked about that special thing being the quality, the quality of equality and unity in the nation, and you gave a beautiful example about a Jewish king as opposed to a king from the nations of the world, where, if I remember correctly, kings among the nations are like on the same level as the Creator, and the whole nation looks up to them. A Jewish king stands along with the people, and all of them together look up to the Creator.
We also saw that throughout the thousands of years of the development of humanity compared to our nation. That in our nation, they never respected the rich people, the powerful ones, the people of office or power. They respected only the sages. And there's no such thing that somebody is greater and somebody else is lesser, but only according to how much he is Adam, human. Therefore, this equality, the tendency towards equality is really rooted inside of the nation, so much so that nobody feels himself less than. There are even jokes about the army in Israel that some great officer as well as the soldier are as if at the same time as friends.
Yeah, of course, they call them by first names. Today I was reminded that Israel is the only country in the world where on a radio interview you can call the Prime Minister Bibi by his first name. And he's fine with it, no problem.
Because indeed it's enrooted inside of our nation, and it stems from the same source that our nation left Babel, with unity, equality, and in spite of the changes, the differences between each and every one, we're all equal. And indeed, no one will ever feel whether he's poor or rich, wise or not so learned, that he is less than others. This equality is so much inside of us that, and you see it also really in everything, in any place, the way that people relate to one another. And sometimes it's in the direction of bad, that they disregard simply, oh, him, and I'm really the same. But this is what no other nation has. There is always subordination. There is always some distance between people.
Yes, classes.
Classes. But here we don't have it. And we always had that because it is rooted within the spiritual genes of the nation. We can't have it any other way.
I have a few questions about that. First of all, what does that give us? Okay, fine, so we're different in that, but what does that give us?
What this gives us is an entry towards unity, towards the unification of the nation, if we use this tendency correctly, that we can unite faster. We don't have to break down some walls between us. We are all partners, we're all equal, we're all like brothers. There is this proximity between us. The problem is only that this proximity once was in us out of love thy friends as thyself, until the ruin of the temple, and then it disappeared.
Moreover, it's written that it turned into unfounded hatred.
But even if not hatred, we feel proximity to one another because we have enemies. Since the whole world hates us, we have to be together, like nuts in a bag, that nobody really feels that he belongs to the others, that he wants to be with the others. We simply share the same trouble, and that is not good. We now have to work on us coming back to those values that we had prior to the ruin of the temple, because we came back to the same land of Israel.
That unity of Jews, I'd like to read, with your permission, two excerpts talking about the unity of Jews from two different angles. The first, it's not very orthodox to do what I'm about to do, it's highly unacceptable, but I want to read an excerpt from Adolf Hitler's book, Mein Kampf. He writes this: the Jew, I'm translating as I read it, so that's from the English version of the book. The Jew is only united when a common danger forces him to be, or a common booty entices him. If these two grounds are lacking, the qualities of the crassest egoism come into their own, and in the twinkling of an eye, the united people turns into a horde of rats, fighting bloodily among themselves.
Well, that's certainly not true.
Yeah,
we were never in that state. There was unfounded hatred. There was a struggle. There was a war of brothers. Even back then, in the periods between the first temple and the second temple, and during the time of the second temple, that when it existed, there were many fights in the nation on an ideological background. Is particular. There were the Pushim and the Tzdokim. There were many groups, and we know that also. But it's not that this is a tendency in the nation.
The reason I brought this specific excerpt is because many anti-Semites are afraid of the quality of unity of Jews. They feel that Jews use it against them.
That was never the case. We were never directed against anyone or in general relating to some nation. Our direction is towards our center, as if there is a nation and it feels itself whole. It doesn't have to scatter among other nations. It never wanted to conquer some country and rule it. Just like there were all these periods with other nations when they came over and conquered some territory, sat there. Today, no nation sits in its own territory. Even if you look at the Hungarian, even the Germans, where did they come from? They all came from different territories. But the Jews never had such a tendency. They knew that their place is the land of Israel, and at some time they will come back there, and they always prayed in the direction of Jerusalem. And it wasn't important to them where to live, here or there, in some place on planet Earth. Rather, it's just one place where we belong. Therefore, all of these complaints, claims that we want to conquer someone, we want to rule someone, that was never the case. It was really a concern only for maintaining themselves as much as possible, to be secure about today and tomorrow, because life was such that they were always among the robbers and the enemies. So, of course, we had to think about that. But actually, they were always in a state where if we don't have to move out of here today, we'll probably have to move out of here tomorrow. So we never felt ourselves as that we're going to settle here and this will be our place for generations. Never. There was always this feeling in the nation that everything is transient, temporary.
Yeah, because we had to go back to Zion.
And this is really rooted in the nation, and it's inside of our genes, so that we feel it. It is a natural perspective that we have, an instinctive outlook on our lives, on our order in the world.
I'd like to read another excerpt and then ask another question in the spirit of the next excerpt about unity. Winston Churchill was known for his liking the Jews. for his empathy toward them. And there's an excerpt of his, which is mentioned in Like a Bundle of Reeds, where he explains what he feels toward Jews. This is from Martin Gilbert's book, Churchill and the Jews. So this is what he writes. The Jews were a lucky community because they had that corporate spirit, the spirit of their race and faith. Churchill would not ask them to use that spirit in any narrow or clannish sense, to shut themselves off from others, far from their mood and intention. He writes in those very words, far from their counsels that were given to them by those most entitled to advise. That personal and special power which they possessed would enable them to bring vitality to their institutions, with which nothing else would give. Churchill believed, without disrespect, that a Jew cannot be a good Englishman unless he's a good Jew. And here he explains what being a good Jew means, that corporate spirit. So that brings me to the question that today we can see that Jews behave the opposite of the corporate spirit. In many countries, they are leading capitalism, and there's nothing farther from the corporate spirit than capitalism. So how do you turn that tide around?
We were never so involved with the nations of the world as in the 20th century and the 21st century. We were always related, connected to one another. If we're speaking about Europe, and especially Russia, the Ukraine, Poland, we lived in a very enclosed manner, very compact. And we then had to guard ourselves, keep ourselves, so we had community life that were very juicy, with the synagogue, weddings and circumcisions, bar mitzvahs, etc. Around this there were many issues, and of course the days of Shabbat. Every week you enter along with everyone into some events, etc. There were small places where we developed. Only a few individuals lived in a big city. They were allowed to live there, and they were there. But all the others lived in these special territories, in small places, and they had community life. And indeed there was great reciprocity back then. It was a great mitzvah, precept, to get every girl married. She must not remain without a husband. And it could not be that a Jewish child would not know how to read and write, or he would know the Bible, etc. And a wise scholar was always held at height. Every family wanted their son to be a wise scholar, that their daughter would be the wife of a wise scholar. So those things were very clear to everyone. And only when the 20th century began, which is a very special time, which comes before the 21st century, because the 21st century is the spiritual century. We are now entering a very special time, the whole world, the time of connection, whether we want to or not. This is now this general crisis is nevertheless bringing us to connection, necessarily, whether we want to or not. So the Jews had to scatter finally among all the nations, to mix themselves with everyone, and this is what happened through all of these revolutions that happened in the 20th century, when we came out of all of these small places where we used to live locally as a community. And we started entering universities. The Jews became not just some physicians like before, but they also entered industries and science and culture, theater, which was never something that we were involved in. This is something, some area that we would keep away from. And really everywhere, you can now see that we've entered things so much that we really have lost this feeling of community. And we have to come back to that. The whole present state, which is really a dangerous state, is because we simply have to come back to that connection, to that state of community. We don't have now to look for places where we can live this compact life. We have that through the internet, all kinds of connections, since everyone today is connected to one another. But to feel again that we belong to a single nation, the opposite of the tendency, the direction that is going on in the States and also in Europe relatively. In the States it's even more. We have to feel ourselves as belonging to a single nation, and that nonetheless this nation, even though it is scattered among the nations, it remains as a nation.
And wouldn't that increase anti-Semitism against us? Because the protocols of the Elders of Zion talked about that, you know, the Jewish network that is trying to control the world and all that.
Anyway, regardless. Yes, we have to understand that anti-Semitism, in the end, will disappear only if we show the nations of the world what we bring them. That they are falling into crisis, and in opposition to them saying that the Jews are to be blamed for this crisis and they brought about all the bad that there is in the world, from the greatest thing to the smallest things, like the example that you gave before.
With Malaysia and all that. South Korea, yes.
It has nothing to do with one another, because the hatred is simply irrational. It stems out of the inner nature, the inner nature of the world, and it can disappear only on the condition that we will correct that nature, the secret of nature, that we will bring the world what we call the light for the nations, that they will understand that instead of the darkness that they have in their lives, and they live this darkness, and they feel this darkness, and they feel this darkness has to do with the Jews. The South Koreans and those people from Malaysia and all of the other ones, they are right. What are they right about? That they feel subconsciously, internally, instinctively, that the lack of success, the blows, even natural disasters, even tsunamis or hurricanes, all kinds of such things, somehow are
our fault.
Yes, our fault.
Fine, but so...
And if you will not bring them instead the light, instead of the darkness, instead of the blows, you'll bring them the salvation.
What is this light? How is it expressed in our world?
Expressed by us first uniting and bringing them an example that this is how you should live, with an explanation that we are uniting and we are keeping between us love thy friend as thyself, and along with that we teach them to be the light for the nations. It's not just about being an example. It has to be an example in practice. It has to be effective, useful.
In what? What does it mean effectively?
The demonstration has to be clear that this is how, in our times, the whole integral world must be arranged. That it is in crisis, and this is the solution for the crisis. This is the solution for all of our troubles, and the entry for the good life. This is the remedy, this is the means.
Let's put it this way. Nazi Germany was fascist. Tightly united, like a fist.
Is about connection.
Right.
Yes.
And we saw where that led. So what does it mean that we set an example?
Because we're not doing it for the sake of repressing anyone. We're doing it all over the world. All of us, as it says, and they shall all know me from the greatest to the littlest. Everyone have to discover that upper force, which is bestowal and love.
So if Jews
like
unite,
in Babel, when Abraham so much wanted us to do it, all of us together, that this is the solution against the Tower of Babel, against this ego that is between us, that is controlling us.
Jews unite among themselves first, wouldn't that re-distance us from the nations and evoke even greater hatred?
If Abraham would have stayed with his group, 5,000 people among the 3 million in Babel, and he wouldn't be thrown out, and he kept disseminating of his idea.
The idea.
And gradually he would succeed in connecting the Babylonians through those 5,000 people.
Human history would be very different.
That's right. For the better, yes.
For the better.
We simply had to discover our ego, otherwise it wouldn't be. And back then the ego was very small, very primitive. We have to discover the great ego. We've done it. Actually, we finished doing that in the 20th century, and now we're in a great descent from all of those capitalistic tendencies, egoistic tendencies. We're now beginning to despair from that, and you can see that in every person all over the world. So now is the time. Now the whole world is Babel, and that group has to keep that, has to maintain that message, that course, as it had to do back then, and it's written.
True.
And this is what the nations of the world actually subconsciously expect from us. And this is why they blame us. And behind this accusation, you can see that they are actually blaming us for why are you not doing what you're supposed to do. I'm telling you, I was once in America, actually in the US, and I met in some hotel, I met some person who was traveling across the US, and he was German, with his wife. They used to travel in this big station wagon. A simple person, according to his hands, you could see that he was some worker. Maybe he's a mechanic, has a garage, doesn't matter, but he's working with his hands. And he stopped me and he said, you know, we both lived in the ground floor in a motel, so our rooms were adjacent. And he told me, you know, sadly, why are you not building the temple? I looked at him like that, and I didn't know how to answer him.
So what? He's a Christian,
but
so...
Yes, Christian, but... And you can sit down on him.
Obviously, they know the role of the Jews.
So this complaint, is a claim that really comes from this ordinary, simple working man who feels it inside.
It's strongly sensed, especially among Christians, specifically those who believe. They also believe in the role of the Jewish people. They don't know that the Jewish people has to do with unity. They don't know that.
Matter. Start presenting it to them. Start showing them that it stems from the Torah. This is the whole Torah. It's all about love their friend as thyself.
This is really my question. The question and the fear, really. The minute we present it, because in the previous show you said, start talking to them about unity, they'll turn to you like that. But on the other hand, I hear Jews, especially from overseas, who are afraid about this topic. With regard to the topic of unity, they try to conceal their connection to each other, fearing that...
The connection to the Torah, not Judaism. Judaism nowadays is just some...
I'll explain what they sense as much as I can understand it. They sense that they're being blamed, being accused of being like a mafia.
Yes.
Tending to each other, helping each other out, fixing each other up. So the minute we emphasize unity even more, it'll stir up all the nations to jump on us.
Don't the Christians of certain kind at least help one another? The Afro-Americans, don't they feel themselves as belonging to something? The South Americans, the Spaniards, don't they feel themselves as belonging to, or even the Chinese people living in New York and others? You have many such ethnic groups in the world, and nobody is complaining about them because they don't have a task, they don't have an ideal.
And we too don't have the feeling that.
So introduce them to them, otherwise they will come to you and they will obligate you to recognize to your task, your mission.
Okay, I'll ask again. So what's our mission?
To show the whole world the form of connection that has to save the world.
I understand about the form of connection. What is the form that has
Unity among people.
Save the world?
And the whole world agrees with that.
What connection among people?
They don't have the force, the strength to do it. They don't have the method. The Torah is the method. What is the Torah? I created the evil inclination, which is separating among all human beings. I created the Torah as a spice. What does that mean? There is a reforming light. The reforming light comes only by the realization of the wisdom of Kabbalah. This is not Judaism, it is the wisdom of Kabbalah. This is what Abraham activated in Babylon.
Come again, because I didn't get it. Torah isn't the book of Torah, is not the prophet, or what is
force. It is a light that we can draw to us. That force, we can awaken it inside of us. On the condition that we come together and unite according to the method called Torah. And then that force awakens in us and it glues us together. And this is how it is with the whole of humanity. It is actually destined to connect the whole of humanity.
And what is the method called Torah? That connects us and awakens this force?
The method that if our evil inclination has reached its ultimate limits, as we see now, and this is also what it says in all the books, Kabbalists really pointed at our time that we now have to realize it, actualize it. This is why the wisdom of Kabbalah is revealed. We now have to actualize the connection in such a way that it will bring us to a state where we will also be in harmony with the whole of nature, with the still, vegetative and animate. We will be like some sort of a cancer all over. We are like cancer now on the planet that is eating everything.
That's what we are now.
Tomorrow. So in our unity, we will also understand how we have to relate each one to the other, and also how all of us will unite in such a way to relate correctly to nature.
I really thank you, Dr. Laitman. I just noticed our time is up already. So we really will finish here, but we'll continue because we really are only just beginning. So we'll continue in the next show. Thank you very much again, Dr. Laitman. Until then, goodbye.